Welcome to the channel, guys. We are back again, and today I'm going to be talking about Toy Boy by Moschino. So stay tuned for that. And if you like the content, guys, hit that like and subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. Now, Toy Boy has actually been hyped up a little bit by the community, and I gotta be honest with you, it was one that I kind of reluctantly decided to try. Not a big fan of rose, and that's the main reason. I do like some fragrances with rose in it, like I like Noir de Noir, I like Viking, but I also find that the rose in these is not super prominent, and this is apparently a rose-heavy fragrance. But nonetheless, I did decide to try this one out to see what all the talk was about, to see if I think it's as good as everyone says, or if it suits my taste as much as everyone says. So, I did pick up a sample of this recently, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised with how this one actually smells. So, what I get from this one in the opening is actually a little bit of an almost bubblegummy reddish or rouge kind of a vibe right on the initial burst. It's sweet. It's a little bit like a big red chew or something. If you've ever smelled Criminal of Love, it's a Russian Killian exclusive. I believe it's been discontinued. But it does have this kind of muted rose, which is kind of like a big red chew, kind of like a bubblegum kind of a vibe. And this has that same similar kind of a rose right on the opening, but it's actually much stronger. So where in Criminal of Love I find it's actually kind of backgrounded, that bubblegummy vibe, that big red chew vibe is really front and center. Now within the first, I want to say first 30 seconds or so, that's where I get that initial burst, and then what comes to the forefront are the spices. It's really super spicy right up front. So I do get a lot of spices in this one. Probably, I think for the first hour or so, there's a lot of spices in with a little bit of freshness. There is a sweetness there too. And the sweetness really takes away from the fact that there is a prominent rose. And I will actually say, in the opening, I don't really smell it as rose. It does smell rougey or red, but I wouldn't really describe it as rose. Like I said, more like a big red chew or something like that. And there is a bit of freshness there. That sort of dies down the spiciness, and you get a little bit more of a freshness. But it is only subtly fresh, I would say. And it does still have that sort of big red chew sweetness. When this one moves into the dry down is when, to me, it smells more rosy. There is definitely still a slight freshness and an undertone of sweetness. And I'm guessing that's, from like the pear and maybe the rose itself. And I do actually detect a little bit of what does smell kind of fruity with that rose. But that's also when the rose, to me, starts to blossom as actually smelling rosy. And it does become a lot more floral dominant at this point. Which is interesting because it smells extremely appealing. And I know apparently a lot of people are saying, this is a very feminine fragrance. And I would kind of agree with that, partially. I think on the opening, especially with all the spices, this doesn't come off to me particularly feminine. Even before those spices kick in, it's more of a unisex. During the dry down, when it is a lot more rosy, then I do think it is a little bit more feminine, but it's definitely something that if you enjoy, anyone can wear whatever they want anyways. It does come off, I guess, a little feminine if that's something that bothers you. And personally, I think, different fragrances have different moods, and I'm not always in the mood for like a very masculine, boozy or tobacco fragrance kind of thing. And this is actually a very nice change, very refreshing. Honestly, this is the kind of thing I would love to see more from designer brands. Not so much something that smells like this, but something that's just, different. This isn't a blue fragrance. This isn't, although I find it very easy to smell and I think it's very appealing, it's not your typical mass appealing fragrance, even though I do think it is something that has quite a bit of mass appeal to it. But in any case, I would love to see more of these things where they're just going in a little bit different direction. And I think, that's one of the areas that designers have let me down in the last year or two, where there are a lot of great designer fragrances. A lot of them just kind of follow the trends. But in any case, back to Toy Boy. Was very pleasantly surprised. Also pleasantly surprised with the performance for this one. So As far as longevity goes, I will say that this one easily has lasted 8 hours on my skin. In fact, you know, I got up, had a shower, put this on, had another shower after working out, and I could still smell it. It was still on my skin. It was a lot more faint at that point, but it does have really good longevity. The projection is pretty solid, good sillage as well for the first few hours, and I can definitely get little whiffs of it in the air, especially if I move close to a place where it's been applied, whether that be my hand moving near my face or whatever. So it does not, you know, completely become a skin scent, and it does have pretty strong longevity. This is definitely a different fragrance. You know, I mean, this is something that does feel a little more niche because it's just not following all of the trends. So I think there's a lot of people this would appeal to, but it's also, even though it is a very pleasing fragrance, I don't think everyone's going to want to wear it. Personally, I could see wearing this, and this is just such a surprise to me. As I mentioned, I'm not usually a fan of heavy florals. I'm not usually a fan of these kind of rose fragrances, but this is done really, really well. There is just this undercurrent of a slight freshness, a little bit of fruity sweetness, and a very nicely done rose. The spices, I kind of wish they stayed around a little longer. I find that in the opening, it's very, very spicy, and then that just basically disappears, whereas I would prefer it was a little less spicy but longer lasting with the spiciness. But ultimately, again, very nice full fragrance, nice depth, and it has a nice complexity to it. It doesn't change a ton, but there are a lot of facets there. So it's not completely linear, but it's not one of these fragrances that you'll put it on and then it'll smell completely different within the next, 3 or 4 hours. But anyways, I mean, even if you're not a fan of, rose fragrances or florals, I would actually suggest trying to get a sample of this one. Of course, sample it first because, like I said, I don't think everyone would want to wear this fragrance even if they do not mind or like the smell of it. But it is definitely one of these fragrances that I think could sort of change your mind a little bit about floral fragrances. So for me, this one has been hyped up, and I think, it definitely lives up to that, in my opinion, as it's really, really well put together. But anyways, also, situations, I mean, this is one that I think could be very classy, very elegant, because it does have that prominent rosiness that I think is just done really well, and I think you could wear this in a more formal situation. It is a little bit fresh, so I think it does lend itself a little bit better to the warmer weather. But spring, I think, would be better than summer, but it is still really, really nicely done. I think you could still wear it in the summer, but definitely more of a spring fragrance. Spring, I think, is the ideal time. That is actually my first fragrance that I've ever tried from the house of Moschino, and I was not disappointed at all, so very happy about that. But I think I am going to leave it at that. Guys, have you tried Toy Boy? Have you tried anything else from Moschino? Actually, if you have recommendations for this brand, leave a comment down below. What fragrance do you think I should try out from them, or what fragrance do you think isn't talked about by this brand? And as always, if you like the video, like the damn video, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.